Just ahead on Tempo in Depth, do you have a teenager? As parents, we all know those teen years can be tough, but there are fears many of us may never have thought about. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report about 10% of students nationwide report being physically hurt by a boyfriend or girlfriend in the past year. Tonight, Tempo in Depth learns more about the issue of domestic violence.
Support for Tempo in Depth is provided by the members of PBS 39 and by
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. Research shows 1 in every 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. It's something many of us consider an adult issue, but experts say education should start much earlier. What does it mean to educate teenagers and adolescents on the dangers of dating and domestic violence? Well, too often, it means the difference between life and death. Tempo in Depth's Grover Silcox introduces us to a father who lives with the loss of his beautiful 16-year-old daughter and works to educate others so they can avoid his pain.
And I can tell you that the pain of losing a child to a violent homicide is second to none.
Gary Cuccia turned pain into purpose. His fight to save lives from domestic violence began when his daughter Demi died at the hands of a former boyfriend.
We thought maybe she got stabbed once or twice. We thought maybe she was going to be okay, but then I come to realize she was stabbed 16 times and she didn't survive.
Beautiful, bright, and outgoing, 16-year-old Demi Cuccia lived with her mother. That's where her 18-year-old ex-boyfriend showed up.
Heaven is the perfect place, just as you said it would be. There's just one more thing, Mom. There are many treasures here that only I can see. The one I'm sending down to you today is education is the key.
I didn't know what a warning sign was. I had no idea that she was in grave danger, or I would have done things completely different. And the sad thing is I don't believe she did either.
Demi's parents and sisters Sage and Alexa and older brother Jake still struggle with the loss.
You can sit here and say, you could say what ifs all day, you know what I mean?
People write off teen troubles as just speed bumps on the road through adolescence. But certain warning signs spell grave danger. The Cuccias want teens to see the red flags and know what they mean. They want to prevent a nightmare. Since Demi's death, they've led a campaign for mandatory teen dating violence education in Pennsylvania's public schools. This one is sponsored by PBS 39, thanks to a state grant.
You have the right to privacy and time alone, to say no or disagree, and you have the right to break up.
When you standardize a requirement, when you say all schools throughout the districts must have a domestic violence prevention program, then we know that every single child in our state will be protected and they'll all receive the same kind of knowledge.
And that knowledge is?
Usually it's very subtle. It may start with, so, you know, I don't understand why you have to hang out with your, male friend anymore, because I think he just wants to, date you. And so they try to isolate, take them away from their friends, sometimes their family members.
When you end a relationship like this, do not allow yourself to be put in a situation where you're alone with someone like that.
It always ends up being about power and control over another person. So we use those terms a lot when we're defining what it is.
The Cuccias and their fellow advocates worked with Center County State Representative Scott Conklin to pass House Bill 2026, the Demi Bray Cuccia Law, which required a teen dating violence curriculum to be taught from 7th to 12th grades in Pennsylvania's public schools. Ultimately, the state legislature passed a slightly different bill.
It's changed from a mandate to a recommendation, and instead of starting in grade 7th, it's now the language says grade 9.
We got a little bit, but this isn't what's needed. We want to make this mandatory. Again, when we talked about it, over 80% of the public doesn't even know that this exists. 70% don't even know when there is an abusive relationship that their children are in it.
Dr. Cuccia believes education could have saved his daughter's life.
Had my daughter had some education on teenage dating violence, just if nothing else, to know better than to put herself in a situation where she was alone with this boy after you break up with him, because that's the most lethal time. And if she would have known that, she'd be alive today.
In June of 2009, John Malarkey was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison for the death of Demi Cuccia. Although they aren't required to offer a standardized curriculum, many Pennsylvania schools address the issue of teen dating violence with special programs, such as the one presented for 8th graders at Brockle Middle School in Bethlehem.
The programs start off talking about healthy versus unhealthy relationships, and then we get into more of the unhealthy side of it and teach them what is unhealthy, what are some characteristics of being in an unhealthy relationship. We always try to use those words power and control when we're talking about any type of violence, even when it's starting off as just bullying.
They also discuss how 1 in 4 teens experience some form of harassment through technology.
It is very easy to go and post a message on Facebook or to text someone, 100 times a day if you're looking for them, and that is considered a form of harassment.
Students are encouraged to speak freely about teen dating and domestic abuse, something that doesn't always come freely. In the case of teen dating violence and domestic abuse, knowledge is power. The power to prevent a tragedy that can scar a young person for life or take that life away.
It can happen to anyone. I would have never thought in my lifetime that I would be sitting here talking about this situation that occurred in our family.
You see it once in a while on the news, hear about it, but you don't really comprehend it until, until it actually happened.
The cuccia's broken heart is big enough for others who share the same pain and the same mission to prevent others from losing a daughter, a sister, or a friend. For Tempo in Depth, this is Grover Silcox reporting.
For many, the issue of domestic abuse is something foreign, something they can't relate to. But for Heidi Marco, it's changed her life's focus. In 2005, her sister Robin died when she was killed by her husband. Heidi's taken her pain and created the Beginning Over Foundation to help other women in domestic violence situations. I had a chance to sit down and interview her at her Purple Salon in Easton. Heidi, take us back to that horrible day in 2005 and the event that changed your life forever with your sister Robin.
Okay, on June 15, 2005, I received a phone call that the police wanted to talk to the family and that something terrible has happened, and never in a million years would I have ever thought that her husband would kill her, but that's what happened. He ended up shooting her and later on took his own life.
And they dated for 3 or 4 years beforehand, been married about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
As a family member, did you see any of the warning signs? Everyone says, how can we help other people recognize this and not have to go through what you've had to go through?
Right, and that is a typical question. And I can honestly say, after she was murdered, the initial reaction from myself and my other family members, we were shocked. We had no clue that she was being abused. It wasn't until maybe 6 months to a year later we started hearing little stories. A little bit more came out here and there. Then, after I became really involved with domestic abuse and knowing everything that I could and trying to find out everything I could, I started going back, and there was really no telltale signs that she was an abused woman. However, in my brother-in-law's past, there was a lot of red flags. One being, after my sister was murdered, we found out that he tried to kill his first wife with a pickaxe. So sometimes it's not just the woman that we need to look at to find out if there were any early warning signs. Sometimes it's the mate, and that is where I am today. Let's find out as much as we can about the person that they're involved with.
Now, you took that pain of the loss of your sister and created the Beginning Over Foundation, which will soon celebrate its 5th anniversary. You've done so much with this. Help us understand where Beginning Over is now. You have a great new opportunity to help all kinds of people.
Well, I am very proud of the Beginning Over Foundation. I'm proud of our board members. I'm proud of our volunteers. In the beginning, we started out as being more of an educational organization. I just thought that my voice was free. Boy, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to, talk about this. I'm going to break that silence and the stigma and the shame, and I'm going to have women talk about it. I feel that if we talk about it, what better way than to maybe stop the abuser from abusing? If we talk about it, do you think that an abuser is going to want to be an abuser if they know that their intimate partner is telling people about it? And then the beginning of our foundation started transforming into different means to help people. Through my education and through all of my research, we started going and trying to meet the unmet needs. Today we stand solid. We have big hopes for 2011. One of the biggest accomplishments is our Peaceful Places initiative, which aims to place 12 families a year into transitional housing where they can rebuild on their own.
Help people understand, you can go to a shelter, but that's often only for 30 days, and that's
Correct.
kind of where transitional housing picks up. And how long can people stay there and get the help they need and start to rebuild their lives?
Correct, and that's why I didn't go into the emergency shelter area. However, we do emergency shelter for 3 or 4 days. It's important to know that if you're diagnosed with cancer or some type of a disease, and the doctor says to you, I'm going to give you 30 days, and then you're on your own. We wanted to do more than that. Our programs are a year-long program, which we encompass a lot of things. Wellness is a big component that we're working on for 2011. The health issues associated with domestic abuse. So we have created a wellness facility and a gym, a nutrition center, where we will do exercise, weight training, nutrition, and yoga. And we do a different type of counseling. It's empowerment counseling, where, again, it's a way to empower women. It's okay to sit and talk and be counseled, but I believe we need to have a new way. We need to empower these women and show them that there are other avenues, and to, instead of giving barriers to these women, I believe that we need to give them more choices.
As we sit here in your Purple Salon in Easton, you're about to move that, and it's all part of the makeover after getting out of an abusive situation. You know, as women, we feel good when our hair looks good, or when we have our makeup on, or when we're in shape. You know, how are you allowing this to open up to all women, perhaps those of family members who've dealt with abuse in situations? Are all women able to take advantage of your services?
Yeah, all women, their families, and their children, because knowing that your hair and your makeup and the way you dress and the way you look and the way you feel, it's all an expression of who you are. And women are made of excellence, and I believe that one of the questions women that are in abusive relationships need to ask themselves is, am I better now than I was a year ago, 5 years ago? Do I feel better? Do I have this zest for life? Am I empowered? Am I inspired? Am I happy? Am I living my authentic life? And if you answer no to that, then there's something wrong. And you hear it all the time. This isn't a dress rehearsal. But I can honestly say this is not a dress rehearsal. My sister was killed at the age I am today, 43 years old. And for me to know all of my hopes and my dreams and all the visions that I have, and my family that I love so much, and my friends, and all the wonderful people that I've met, my sister doesn't get a chance for that ever again. And that's what we want to give to other women. We want them to know that we're here. I haven't met a lot of these women that are in these abusive relationships that may be watching this show, but we're here and we're waiting for them.
Heidi, help us learn a little bit more about 12 Weeks, 12 Women.
The 12 Weeks, 12 Women program, I decided to put together, we want to work on 48 women a year. So we figure if we do 12 women every 12 weeks, it's going to encompass everything, complete wellness.
Who are these women that participate?
These women are survivors. These women are well, I'd like to say beginning over after the abuse, recovery, living healthy, happy, and whole. That's what we're aiming for here. Because if a woman leaves an abusive relationship and doesn't become whole again, doesn't overcome all the issues, we have found that they either enter into another abusive relationship or they're just not happy, they're not healthy. So we wanted to be able to empower these women, show them who they can be, learn who their authentic self is, look good, feel good, stand up tall and stand up proud. We want to just take them to another level.
So over the 12 weeks, they have nutrition, it's healthy eating, and not that healthy eating is always bland and it's
Right.
flavorful, just like their lives can return to a flavorful, exciting future. What's all this mean to you, Heidi? You work so hard at it. Why do you keep doing it?
I do it because I feel good about it. I feel good that I am on the path. I am going places where no one is going, and I believe it's essential. I believe in doing something new. If the old isn't working, then we need to try something new. If we look at statistics and we look at laws and they're not changing, then I just believe that we have to change the women. If we can't change the judges and we can't change the laws, then let's change the women. You know, one of the statistics that always bothered me is that 70% of the time the abuser has been able to convince a judge to give them custody of children that they've abused, children that they have seen their mother being abused. So we're not changing numbers and we're not changing statistics, then we're going to change the person that needs to be changed.
You know, Gandhi had a great quote that says, "Be the change that you want to see," and you seem to be living that.
I'm trying my hardest, and I can say that my board members and my volunteers, they are the change. They're helping me be the change that we want to see in the world, and I'm really proud.
Heidi, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it and wish you all the best with the foundation.
Thank you.
Every year in the United States, more than 1 million women are physically assaulted by an intimate partner, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Abuse can result in physical injury, psychological trauma, and even death. Tempo in Depth's Laura McHugh brings us the story of two mothers who live with those consequences every single day.
You can try to strangle light, use your hands and think you've found the throat of it, but you haven't. You could use a rope or a garrote or a telephone cord, but the light, amorphous, implacable, will make a fool of you in the end.
A mother's worst nightmare unfolds for readers on the pages of Slamming Open the Door. In this collection of 41 striking poems, Kathy Sheeter-Bonanno shines a light on her own darkest moments, the grief and sorrow of losing a daughter to domestic violence.
Our daughter was murdered, strangled with her telephone cord by her ex-boyfriend.
Lady Sheeter-Bonanno was 21 years old when she was murdered in 2003. These photographs were taken just weeks before her death as she graduated from nursing school in Reading.
She had dark brown hair and chocolate brown eyes, and she smiled readily. She was the kind of person who was wired to be happy.
Though he maintains his innocence, Lady's ex-boyfriend now serves a life sentence after a jury convicted him of first-degree murder. After the sentencing, Kathy turned to her poetry. But as she sat in front of the keyboard, the topics she used to write about, like relationships and nature, no longer resonated.
I couldn't write about those other things. They seemed small and they seemed negligible relative to the experience I now had.
Kathy explores this all-consuming feeling in Death Barged In, the first poem in her book.
Even as I sit here, he stands behind me, clamping two colossal hands on my shoulders, and bends down and whispers to my neck, "From now on, you write about me."
Chilling verses chronicle Lady's life and the days, months, and years following her murder. From trial hearings to television appearances to the experience of facing the accused murderer's own mother, Kathy's words speak of a pain most can't imagine and have found an audience among those who don't have to. Kathy often hears from victims and family members who have read her poetry and says that's how Lady's memory lives.
I feel like Lady's present in every one of those conversations. And I feel that what was good and beautiful and generous about her spirit is at work when I'm hugging another mother.
Stories like Lady's become illuminated every October when advocates against domestic abuse in the Lehigh Valley honor victims with a candlelight vigil. Tiny specks of light dot the darkness and burn in their memories.
And this is where we get to remember the women and men and children who have lost their lives to domestic violence and celebrate the survivors. We light these candles for hope, for empowerment, and for peace, that they may have peace in their lives.
Barb Whitman shares that hope for peace for herself and her 3 daughters, Brooke, Brenna, and Britton.
What you see on the outside is 3 beautiful, loving, caring, compassionate kids. What's on the inside is still a lot of stuff. Those kids hurt constantly.
4 years after finalizing her divorce, the wounds from Barb's abusive marriage continue to heal. Looking back, Barb clearly sees the warning signs, starting with a lack of trust, then turning into manipulation and control.
I got so enveloped in trying to change a very unhealthy, sick relationship that everything around me, my whole world, just kind of zeroed out.
She lost touch with family and friends, and finally, the abuse turned physical. Barb remembers one night while she was pregnant with her youngest daughter.
He got very enraged and broke through the door and came over and physically pushed me off the bed and then started banging my shoulders against the floor.
Though she tried several times to separate, Barb says she didn't want to break up her family.
And I just kept moving and thinking, if I can do just one more thing right, if I can just, hit the button, this whole nightmare is going to stop. And it doesn't.
Experts in the field of domestic abuse say Barb's attitude is actually a common one.
They want them to stop the abusive behavior, but they love the person, and so sometimes they think they can do something to change the person or help the person, but they can't. The abusive individual needs to recognize that they themselves are the one that has the problem, and they are the one that needs to change.
Ellen Mooney of Turning Point of the Lehigh Valley says victims will try to leave 5, 6, 7 times before they leave for good.
You become addicted, but you don't become addicted to a bottle, you don't become addicted to a drug. You become addicted to an abusive relationship. You become addicted to being told how to do things and why to do things.
Over here! Eventually Barb did leave, and today she and the girls have a safe life together. Though Barb and Kathy have never met, these 2 mothers share a common bond and a common message.
I would never ever want to have somebody go through what I did. There's too many opportunities out there to get help. I think it's just knowing where to go and most importantly, who you can trust.
Girls, women, in the name of mothers everywhere, you deserve better. You know what you need to do. There's life beyond that abusive relationship. Make the phone call. Get the help that you need.
In the final words of her book, Kathy writes about hope. Even in the darkness, she says, there is light, and light eventually prevails.
The sun makes its own history. Light has its way.
For Tempo in Depth, I'm Laura McHugh reporting.
So what do you do if someone you know or love seems to be in an abusive situation? Well, we've got some expert advice for you right now. Peg Durkers joins us. She's the executive director of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Peg, thanks for coming from Harrisburg. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
What do we do? Many times, we may have clues as a best friend or a sibling, but it's so difficult to help that person because it seems many times they feel like they have to go back to the abuser.
Abusers make it very difficult for a person to leave. This is a person who's used a pattern of power and control over the victim for a number of years typically. So we have to understand that this person may be threatening the victim's family, her children, or controlling her own economics in terms of her ability to leave.
Because they control the bank account.
Typically, that's part of the pattern of control. And so we really need to reach out, offer help and assistance, ask people if they're safe, offer perhaps to watch the children while she goes to a domestic violence program and gets some counseling and help. Perhaps they need help finding a new place to live.
How do they, what if they then all of a sudden become upset with you for saying this? No, it's all going to be okay. He's not going to do it again. He promised. How do you help, the mom, the sister, the friend?
Again, just saying, I support you. I am not judging you. This is something that's happening to you. It's not your responsibility. Again, the abuser is the culpable party here, not the victim. Just being there for support.
We've all seen the heartbreak stories, though, where, it ended in tragedy. And nobody wants that tragedy to happen to another person, whether we know them or not. And just informing people, there's such a stigma behind it. And how do we help alleviate that stigma?
There is a great stigma about domestic violence and sexual violence. What we need to understand is that it's pervasive. Women, typically, about 85% of the victims are women. Of every social economic strata are affected by domestic violence. Obviously, people with more money, more access to money and resources have more alternatives. But there is help. It's really important to know that there is help, and if someone is thinking about leaving, that they need to do it in a safe way. And the local domestic violence programs can help you, or the National Domestic Violence Hotline can help you in terms of establishing a safety plan.
Peg Druckers, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate your information.
Thank you, Amy.
The harsh reality of the issue is most cases of domestic violence are never reported to the police. The latest numbers showed in Pennsylvania alone, 180 women died in a year's time due to domestic violence. If you'd like to learn more about this issue, check out Turning Point of the Lehigh Valley at turningpointlv.org or Heidi Marco's Foundation, Beginning Over, at beginningover.org. And don't forget to look at our weekly question on Facebook. We would love to incorporate your comments in future shows. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Good night.
Support for Tempo In-Depth is provided by the members of PBS 39 and by